And sometimes it's easier just to keep it like this so that it doesn't take up the whole screen and you can see the questions on the side. So, hey everybody, how are we doing today? I see that you are all doing a really great job with this next unit that we've been working on. I've enjoyed reading your journals and all of the different activities you've been completing, so keep up the good work. Today we're going to be talking about financial things that I think are important to cover. We have a guest speaker here today. His name is Mark Munzenberger. He's the financial education specialist at the University of Michigan's Credit Union. So he's going to be going over some of those things to talk about financial fitness, being prepared, and kind of just go over some important topics. Again, if you want to just mute your mic, you can do that. And if he wants you to discuss anything, you can open your mic or you can use the chat box. And then I'll wrap things up at the end and we can go over any questions that you may have about the next unit and what's due tonight at 11:59 p.m. So I'm going to pass it over to him. Okay, thank you. And then if you want to turn off your webcam, you can just click that right there.
Okay, that sounds great. And Megan, to advance it, just kind of like this.
You could do that, yep.
Yeah, okay, that sounds perfect. Well, I'm going to hop down here. Well, thanks for that nice introduction, Megan. It is great to be with everyone on the webcast today. Like she said, I am Mark Munzenberger. I do work at the U of M Credit Union. I also spend a lot of time here on campus at Washtenaw as well as at Ypsilanti, supporting the Eastern Michigan community. So I've been in financial services for about 15 years now, and I really enjoy my role. I do a lot of outreach and wellness programs and financial counseling and home buyer education counseling. So a number of different angles kind of coming at this concept of financial literacy. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this contact information up at the end as well. And so you're always welcome to reach out to me if you've got any individual questions after the workshop and that type of thing. So let's kind of dive in. I'll give you guys a little bit of a feel for where I'm going to take you today. I got you for about 40, 45 minutes, something like that. I want to make sure I respect your time. So we're going to have a little bit of discussion at the beginning about financial wellness, just this concept of like, gosh, what is financial wellness, and what are the areas and how do we define that? We'll get into a little bit more meat and potatoes as respect to a budget or a spending plan. I've got a few money mistakes that I want to share with you. I know we've probably got a pretty diverse group. We probably have some young folks on the webcast today and maybe some middle-aged. So I'm going to talk about some money mistakes that I've seen, that consumers make. And then finally we'll finish today with some discussion on credit and the importance of credit and how to read your credit report. So if we were just to start off, I would love to just hear from you. Just go ahead and chat your responses to me. And, if I were to throw this question out to you, we understand kind of from a physical nature what goes into physical fitness. Oh, we need to exercise. We need to have good blood pressure. We need to watch our diet, all those kind of things as it relates to physical fitness. What are some characteristics? What plays into financial fitness? What would I see if somebody is doing very well financially? So go ahead and just chat that in. I'm going to give you 30 or 60 seconds. And there's no right or wrong here, gang. It's just a way to kind of kick us off. And it's okay if you even do a few multiple chats too. Just 1 or 2 word answers is totally fine. Yeah. Good credit score, a good credit report is important. Yeah, being able to budget well, good. Chelsea, we're going to talk about that right up front. And certainly we've got a couple acknowledgments that, good credit score, good credit report, having enough money in savings to cover bills. Good, I totally agree with that. I'm going to stretch, I'm going to push you a little bit to even think beyond just living day to day, month to month. I'm gonna want a good saving strategy to set us up for not only getting through the month, but more longer term. So perfect. Well, you guys are exactly where I want you to be. And a lot of times, especially when I kind of throw that question out, let's come down here a little bit. A lot of times when I throw that question out, especially to a younger group, a lot of times this is the first, especially the high school students, they're like, yeah, if you want to do well financially, it's all just how much you make. And I get that. Certainly that certainly helps. But my definition of financial fitness and wellness is a little bit more behavioral based. So I'm just showing you this slide just to kind of kick us off a little bit. I like this because it's kind of a holistic look at things. And a lot what you'll see here is more behavioral based. It doesn't necessarily drive on just income. I can share with you guys, I did a little bit ago, I've been doing this for a while. I do a lot of financial counseling, and I have worked with plenty of people and plenty of couples with really, really good salaries, but they struggle with their money management. They have less than stellar credit scores, a really kind of inconsistent retirement plan, making good income, but there's maybe not a real solid plan. So these are some areas that are important for you guys to look at in addition to income. Certainly the spending category. Do you have a good ability to spend less than you're bringing in, and do you have a good plan to get those bills paid on time and in full? The only way I can make that happen, you guys, is if we have a good plan, a spending plan or a budget. Then that second category is saving. Everyone should have both short-term and long-term savings. Really important to have both. Sufficient living expenses and liquid savings. I know that term liquid is a little unusual for this slide, but really what that means is, can I get to it quick? Do I have some emergency savings that I could get to quick? And do I have enough to save for both the expected and the unexpected things? And then number 4, have sufficient long-term savings. All of us, all adults, whether you're in your 20s, 30s, or 40s, we all need to be looking down the road a little bit. I have a few slides here. There was a study, gang, at the end of 2016, which is about 18 months ago or so. 33% of all adults have nothing saved for retirement. 1 out of every 3 adults. That's challenging. The Social Security system was never really established to be your only source of income in retirement. So we really have to focus on number 4, have a plan for creating wealth based on long-term savings. The borrowing category, kind of that debt to income ratio. How much is our net income going towards debt? Student loans, credit cards, home payments, auto payments, all of those things. And then we always want to back that up with a good credit score. And that's all behavioral based. We have a good plan to make sure that those obligations that we've entered into, are we paying those on time? We're not borrowing more than we need to. And a prime credit score certainly helps us, moving forward in terms of expense. And then lastly is that green bullet, and it says plan. Are we planning ahead with appropriate insurance based on our situation and our family status? And do we have a good ability to plan ahead for expenses? And really, I just, there's so many different examples. But you guys right now are in school, and hopefully you understand that there'll be probably another tuition payment in another 3 or 4 months, and there are holidays and family celebrations and home improvements that we make. So do we have a good financial ability to kind of look down the road and create ourselves some savings, so it's not kind of a sticker shock when we get to those events? So before I kind of move on to some of the material, does anyone please feel free to chat in? Hopefully this slide just kind of sets the stage for a few things that I want to talk to you about. It's a holistic look at financial wellness. So that's kind of how I would summarize this section. If you were to come to me and say, Mark, I'm struggling a little bit. I feel like I'm not too good with my finances. These are the areas in which I'd want to have conversation with you. I'd want to talk to you, and I would ask you questions in all of these areas. I wouldn't ask you necessarily, the first question out of my mouth would not be, how much do you make? I would want to know how you're doing in these categories. And that really would give me a sense of kind of how your financial health or wellness is. All right. Let's scroll down just a little bit so I can see. There we go. Okay. So let's kick things off. Really, my important takeaway before we get into some money mistakes is just this concept of using a budget or a spending plan. So Megan, I'm going to throw this question out to you. What do people wear on their wrist sometimes when they're walking around the block? It's this little tiny thing on their wrist. What is that called?
Fitbit.
Yeah, and what's the purpose of a Fitbit? To do what?
To be conscious, I think, of our exercise and staying healthy and keeping a plan in place for how much, how many steps we're taking.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So if you walk around the block a couple times, at the end of that walk, you actually look at the Fitbit, don't you? It's a tool. It's a tangible tool to say, how are you doing? 5,000 steps, 7,000 steps, that type of thing. I'm kind of using the analogy. I want you to think of a budget or a spending plan as simply a tool. I do not want you to think of it as anything restrictive or burdensome. Oftentimes I'll use a statement like this because a lot of adults really have a very negative connotation towards a budget. So I say, well, we can look at this in two ways. We can say I am on a budget, okay, or I use a budget. And I strongly encourage people to gravitate towards number two, which is I use a budget. It's not, if you came to work with me, I would never say, okay, Megan, you've been bad, so I'm putting you on a budget. Adults don't like that. I would rather have you think about spending plan or a budget as simply a tool along with some other financial assistance that you get to help keep things on track. And really at its simplest level, a budget is not anything more complicated than a comparison between the income that you've got to work with on a monthly basis and all the expenses that are going out the door. And you can see in this graphic that I have up there, it's intentionally balanced. Because if we were going to kind of have a takeaway here, we don't want those expenses outweighing the income. It's kind of that old saying, we don't want the boat taking on water, do we? You may be able to get through a month or two spending more than you're bringing in, but eventually, if that's consistently happening, if you're spending more than you're bringing in, we will start to have trouble, and that's where we're incurring too much debt, robbing Peter to pay Paul, those type of things. So it's not anything more difficult than a comparison between income and expenses. We've all got different expense categories. Fixed are those expenses that don't change much. Rent, mortgage, auto payments, many of our utilities. Variable expenses oftentimes happen a couple times a month, but we've got more control over them. Groceries, entertainment, those other type of clothing. We all need those type of things, but we have much more ability to control it. And then the periodic expenses are those expenses that come up maybe 2 or 3 times a year, but we can't forget about them. Water bills, insurance premiums, tuition payments, because when those come, they could be pretty substantial. For some of the homeowners, maybe they're paying property taxes. So as you think about a budget, okay, just going to scroll down a little bit. I am going to be very flexible, gang, in terms of what you use. It can be as simple as a notebook and a piece of paper and a pencil. But you'll notice here on top it says it needs to be something tangible, which means somebody else should be able to see it and understand it. Too many people just kind of point to their temple and say, yeah, my budget, it's all up here. And I say, well, let's get it on paper. That's a good first step. It can be as simple as a piece of paper. However, a lot of people would like to use, this is what I use, something like an Excel spreadsheet, because it does the math for me. It allows me to compare months to months. I easily can put my various expenses. I've got a couple different versions of an Excel spreadsheet that I use with folks I work with, and they really like it because they could customize it to their own expenses. But a lot of people also like to use some of the technology that's come out. This is the most popular one, you guys. It's called Mint. It's been out there for about, probably over 10 years now. It's free to use, but if you do use a program like Mint, you do have to actually have access to a computer or a smartphone and allow it to really have access to your bank account. So, because it really does a deep dive into where you're spending money. Some very recently, there's been some very, very powerful and popular apps that have come out to help people with budgeting. I don't want to use paper. I don't want to use Excel. These are some really good apps out there that I would encourage you to take a look at. If you're going to take a look at one, take a look at You Need a Budget, YNAB. It's $5 a month. It's easily the most popular budgeting app. You run it off your smartphone, and it's very powerful. It really helps you, kind of holds your hand. It really kind of allows you to see where your money's going, track expenses immediately. It gives you text alerts and nudges and reminders on your important bills. Really cool. So if you're going to check out any one of them, check out You Need a Budget. But there's other ones, Level Money, Wally. So by all means, use technology if you're comfortable. So this slide right here, gang, and everybody is going to be a little bit different, but this is just to give you a little bit of a representation about kind of the recommended amounts that you should be spending in these categories. And these are very broad. But I just want to bring a couple things to your attention. First of all, housing is listed at 35%. So really I would encourage you to kind of take a look at how much you're spending on your housing expense, and that would be your mortgage or your rent plus the utilities, and I'm including like heating and cooling, and what percentage of your take-home pay each month is housing taking up. And if it's really north of 35 or 40%, the rest of the budget's going to be under some stress. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is that yellow category. It says savings. Now, depending on your age and where you're at kind of in terms of your career and stuff like that, not a lot of us, there are some folks that can't get up to that 10%, but really the important thing here is that we need to consider savings. We need to consider it as an expense category and not necessarily optional or only if we've got a few bucks at the end of the month. We really have to get to a point where 5, 10, 15% of our take-home income every month is going into savings. And for all of us, that could be at, could be at different levels, but we can't think of savings only after the fact as the very last expense. So if you were going to put together a normal, a budget, you guys, just a kind of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here, always start with those fixed expenses, the high priority, the stuff like the utilities, the rent payment, the mortgage, the auto payments. Because if you don't make those, bad things will happen. Phone calls, letters, those type of things. Second is the flexible expenses. Really, have a good deep dive into what you're expending on both your needs and wants, those groceries, the entertainment, all those kind of things, because flexible is where you can have a lot better control. Don't forget about saving, and at the very least, for those that are starting out with this concept of budgeting, the goal is a balanced budget or some money left over. If we're spending more than we're bringing in, we will have difficulty long term. So this is just a very simple, what are those expenses I need to make? What are those expenses that come up regularly? Don't forget about saving, and don't forget about those periodic expenses. And then finally, to kind of end here, here's a financial golden rule, and I know you guys have heard this a million times, is when you're kind of on that fence and you're really kind of contemplating your monthly budget, sometimes ask yourself, is this a need or is it a want? And I know that's simple, but a lot of people do struggle with this. Especially in the the society we live in, it's a very transparent society. We can see what everybody else is doing and on Facebook and stuff like that. So so I am going to jump in to some money mistakes. Does anyone want to chat in a little bit? Why don't you just buy a yes or a no? We won't go into detail. Yes or no. Text me if you use some sort of budgeting system, some sort of tangible system. And you can just type it, just chat me in a yes or a no. Okay. So let me kind of, wow, okay. So boy, Megan, we're about 50-50. So hopefully I've encouraged or motivated, and for those folks that have never used a system, give it a try for a month or two. It gives you a little bit of, I promise it will take no more than 15 to 30 minutes a month. So hopefully those that haven't used it, give it a try. And Megan, I'm going to send you a very simple Excel spreadsheet that feel free to share that with your students so they don't have to start from scratch. Okay? All right. So let's have a little bit of fun, you guys. These are like fun, but a little bit of seriousness and we'll talk a little bit about some common money mistakes. The first one, and I'm looking over at Megan, and she does not have a coffee. She's got some water. But my first one here, gang, is something I call be careful of the latte factor. And oftentimes when we think about our budget, the first thing we gravitate to is those large expenses. Oh, my house, my car. But oftentimes, the accumulation of a lot of little expenses can really add up. We're eating out for lunch every day. We're ordering pizza 4 times a week. We're stopping at Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts 3 or 4 times a week. Take a look at this slide. $5 treat is $100 a month, and that's over $1,000 a year just for coffee. My goodness, if you would have given me $1,200 a couple years ago and allowed me to invest it, I would have been able to probably double it. The Dow has been up so much. So got to be careful of those small expenses that can really be some budget busters. And everybody's are a little bit different. So number 2, and I know probably most people on the webcast today probably have some credit cards. So my money mistake here is we need to be careful with credit cards. It's one of the most common reasons people do get into financial difficulty is excessive use of credit cards. And just so we're 100% clear, and there are people that sometimes get these two concepts interchanged, a debit card and a credit card look almost identical, don't they? Magnetic strip on the back, numbers on the front, but a debit card is directly connected to your checking account. If you use it, the funds will come out immediately. If you use a credit card, I don't care if it's for a $5 hot and ready, you're borrowing money. It's buy now, pay later. So it's a very different concept, even though the tools look different. And if you take a look at this slide right here, we do hear news about interest rates and stuff, and they are slightly ticking up. But if you're looking at something like a mortgage or a car loan, still pretty good, 3, 4, 5%. These rates are for people with A+ credit. Take a look at the average rate for a Visa or MasterCard. It's almost right now close to 18%. And for those folks that like those specialty cards, Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever retail shop you're at, those cards usually average between 25 and 30%. So if you're using a credit card and you're carrying over a balance, it can be an expensive way to borrow money. And we have to be careful because we know that concept of buy now, pay later. Love those rewards. Lots of credit card companies, that's one of the most common things you'll see is cash back. Or here in Detroit, we all have Delta. Whenever we fly, we go Delta, don't we? Well, if you use the American Express card, your bag flies free. Yay, $25. You save $25. Hey, I'm all about saving money. But if you're using that card and incurring lots and lots of interest charges, it's well beyond what you're earning back in terms of rewards. So let's do an example here so we can really understand why we have to be careful with credit cards. Here's a situation. I've got a person with a balance of just a little less than $5,000, pretty normal interest rate, about 16%, and his monthly payment, his minimum payment, is about $105. So let's take a look at some of these questions. What could the interest rate rise to in the event of one late payment? The answer is it can almost double. Credit cards have a variable interest rate, which means, gang, they can change by the month. Very important to always make sure that those credit cards get paid minimum by the due date, because if that interest rate jumps in half, it is so difficult to make progress. So we have to be real careful. Number 2, this is an example of how interest works. Last month, this customer didn't even use the card, sent in a payment of a little more than the minimum, about $125, and take a look at this. Essentially what happened is of that 125, 65 went to the principal, 60 went to interest. So it's a little bit of that analogy like running on a treadmill. My goodness, you send in $125 and you get credit for 65. Holy cow, how can anybody get out of debt like that? Another example here, if the consumer never makes another purchase, they cut the card up, they put it in their refrigerator, they never use it, but they get into a habit of only paying the minimum due, which is typically 2 or 3% of your balance, it will stretch out the duration to almost 18 years. My goodness, and we don't even have a balance here, gang, of $5,000. So that is just so long and to try to pay this off. But look what will happen if you're able to pay just a little bit more than the minimum. Maybe, Megan, you and I work together and you said, you know what? I never use the gym membership. I'm going to cancel it. It frees up $50 extra. We apply that to your credit card balance. Rather than 18 years, I could get you debt-free in 3, just with $50 extra. So the takeaway here is this is something we need to be a little bit more aggressive. Let's not get into a habit of paying credit cards dead last. If we do carry a balance, let's pay more than the minimum, so we're not incurring large interest charges. Okay, good stuff, you guys. I've got a couple more things to share with you. So kind of pivoting a little bit, and I mentioned this early in the presentation, I think it was that orange button, not making savings a priority. And again, I'm completely taking age out of the equation. I don't care if you're 20, 30, 40, anything like that. For all of us, savings does need to be a priority. We don't want to put it dead last. This is an example here of why so many people struggle when they get a little bit older. This was per a report that came out at the end of 2016, 33% of Americans have no retirement savings outside of what they're expecting from Social Security. And then if we even move a little bit farther along the line, another 23% have less than $10,000 saved. And again, that's not, in terms of trying to sustain our lifestyle when we get a little bit older, it's going to be very challenging with only $10,000 or $20,000 saved. So this is not to scare anybody. In fact, it's just to kind of motivate you that, like, I guess it's that important. It's that important, to, regardless of my age, to really make savings a priority. He's done pretty well. Do you know who this is, Megan? Have you ever seen him on the news? He lives in Omaha, Nebraska.
I've seen him. I can't think of his name.
Yeah. Go ahead and chat. Who knows who this is? He's a very famous investor. Name of his company is Berkshire Hathaway. Yeah, and let's see if anyone knows who this is. I'll scroll down here. Yeah, this is actually Warren Buffett. Yeah, and he has obviously done. Yep, there we go. And
just the picture, I guess.
Yeah, he's very famous. He's got some really good books, but he's got some good advice for all of us. Do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving. So we really got to kind of get into this mindset of pay yourself first, which I'll share with you guys in a minute. And in terms of, oh my gosh, Mark, why do we need to save? Here is the best way I can explain it, gang. We save, I'm encouraging you to save because we can't predict the future. We're going to do the best we can to be prepared and stuff like that, but stuff's going to happen. Stuff's going to happen, our family situation, our housing situation, our career choices and stuff like that. Saving money gives you the ability to make choices and to have financial freedom. And we just want to make sure it's part of our approach. When I work with people, gang, I always encourage them, please don't consider savings as one gigantic bucket. Separate them because they are different. And we'll talk about an emergency fund in more detail in just 1 minute, but we should always have 3 different buckets of savings going on. An emergency fund, just for those unexpected events for homeowners. If the furnace goes out in January here in Michigan, Is that an emergency, Megan? It's an emergency. You can't go 30 days in January without a furnace. So that's important. Retirement fund. There needs to be a certain percentage going into a retirement fund. Let that money grow. And then the living life fund. Megan, you shared with me, you hope to be headed on a fabulous cruise next year, right? Family cruise in 2019. When should you start saving? 10 days before the cruise or when?
Right now.
Right now. That's that living life fund for home improvements, for family vacations and stuff like that. So I'm really encouraging you guys kind of think about having different buckets. And as it relates to the emergency fund, this slide kind of gives you a little bit of guidance. Certainly stuff like repairs, insurance deductible, medical emergencies, sometimes we have those. It's okay to use that emergency fund. That's why we have it. However, Megan, if I find out that you're tapping into your emergency fund to buy airline tickets for your cruise, I'm going to be I'm going to ask you about that. So we really want to make sure it's that emergency fund is there as our safety net. So this slide kind of sums up a little bit about really where I want to take you for savings. You know, pay yourself first, make it automatic if you can, 5%, 10% coming right out of that paycheck. Or a lot of people, what they do is they have a checking and a savings account at the same bank or credit union, and they just automatically move that over. $100 every paycheck goes directly to savings. Automatic and consistent is time tested and it will work. For anyone that has the opportunity to work for a company that offers a 401k or a 403b, please take advantage of that. There's not too many places we get free money. A 401k is. It's a benefit that a lot of employers offer, and provided that you contribute, the employer will contribute. So there are still, we've done a lot better over the last decade in terms of encouraging younger people to participate. So please never, always participate in any company plan. Emergency fund, baby step is $1,000. Okay, that's where I'd like us to be at least initially. But if we're able to kind of work up to about 3 months of normal, I would consider kind of very normal bare bones living expenses, that would be a very good, safe, safe emergency fund. And then for those, the earlier we can get started, the better in terms of savings. And we don't have time today, everyone, to do a real deep dive into kind of investing and stuff like that. I would certainly encourage you that, you know, there are people out there that can help you. I don't even consider myself an expert on the stock market and investments and stuff like that, but make sure you're taking advantage of individual retirement accounts and 401ks and getting advice and suggestions from people that really understand and can help you based on your age and your risk tolerance to get into some investments that make sense for you. Because take a look at this slide. If we're able to get started a little bit earlier than later, here's an example of somebody that started in their 20s and she was able to contribute about $150 a paycheck. She gets paid twice a month. If she allows her funds to continue to grow, and this is a hypothetical about an 8% return, which is, you know, about average, she will have almost $1 million by the time she retires at age 65. For someone that waits a little bit longer, same contribution and same return, less than half. So for those, you know, it's never too early to start, but if you can start and encourage any family members to start early, compounding interest will really help. So the last couple I have for you guys, this one is pretty simple. Not using technology, and I have 3 girls and they're all better on the computer and the smartphone than me, but I can navigate around the app that we use here at the credit union. So I would certainly encourage you, use technology, use online banking, use the app at whatever bank or credit union, because we are very busy. We don't have time to go to the branches. So you can use that smartphone to make sure bills get paid on time, to make sure you can look at your current balance, to make sure you're getting text alerts for deposits and withdrawals and stuff like that. Because take a look at this slide. The number one thing I want you guys to take away is I want you to avoid overdraft fees. it by far is the largest fee revenue source for banks. Last year, banks made over $33 billion just because people were spending more, using their debit card, writing checks, than more than they had in their account. And I would, we all work too hard for our money to be paying fees. The average overdraft fee is about $35. So let's have good transparency into exactly what's in our account. And the last money mistake that we're going to talk about for a few minutes is this concept of avoiding bad credit. We live in the United States. Oftentimes we do need to borrow money, and we operate on a system of, we have a credit reporting system here in the United States. We have 3 large credit bureaus, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, and they have credit files on all of us. Usually if you're 18, 19 years old and above, you've got a credit bureau file. And depending on what's in that credit bureau file, all of a sudden, all of us get what's called a score, a credit score. The higher the score, the closest to 850, the better. So you can see how scoring ranges here. It starts as little as 300, all the way up to about 850. Honestly, as long as you're kind of in that fair to good range, you're in good shape. You don't need an 850 to get a good rate. So you're thinking, well, why do I need a good credit score? Does it really matter? If you have a low credit score, this is what will happen. The cost of borrowing money will be higher for stuff like a credit card, automobile, a home. You want to get a mortgage? You will save hundreds of thousands of dollars if you can get a 4% mortgage 30-year fixed rate versus a 6% 30-year fixed rate. And then especially some other ones, especially some college students I work with, they're always interested on that 4th bullet. The last article I've read from Human Resources Magazine is about 80% of employers now do look at applicants' credit history as part of their overall package. Not to say you've got to have A+ credit to get a job, but if you've got a real pattern of some financial issues on your credit report, you may be asked for an explanation. So employment applications, the cleaner that credit report looks, the better. And certainly a lot of us that have to rent and stuff like that, we need to be able to qualify for that apartment. So here is an example that actually gives you a little bit of like, well, come on, does the credit score really matter that much? Well, let's take a look at these 3 people. I've got 3 people here, all wanting to borrow $10,000 for a car loan, and they're going to pay this back in 5 years. Pretty normal. 4 or 5 years is pretty normal. Bob has a credit score of 620, which is a little bit on the low end, gang. That would be, he would be right on that fence, whether it's even going to get approved. And these rates that I give you, these are pretty much what would happen at the credit union and many other financial institutions. So the good news for Bob is he did get an approval. However, since the credit score is low, the bank has priced this at a 19.99% interest rate, which is going to cause his monthly payment to be $265. And if he decides to take this deal, this vehicle, he will pay back nearly $16,000. We've got someone in the middle here. Mary has got a better credit score. She's about 670. Her rate is about 9%. That 670 is about a C+. She's going to get a 9% offer. Her monthly payment is $208, a little bit lower, and she will end up spending about $2,500 in interest. So a little bit better. But let's take a look at the individual on the far right-hand side, Fred. A really strong credit score, a 730. Really strong payment history, manages his debt well. He's offered a 3.5%. That's a pretty good interest rate for a car loan. His monthly payment is $182. It's almost $100 less per month than Bob. And if he decides to take this deal, the car will cost him out the door not even $11,000. Very small interest charge. So hopefully this slide gives you a kind of like, wow, there's a big difference between a 620 and a 730. And this is real dollars, you guys, real dollars. So this slide right here kind of gives you a graphical representation about, hey, I want to keep my score high. The couple things that I really want to draw to your attention: payment history. So remember we talked about budgeting up front. I said, geez, let's make sure we've got a system to get those priority payments. 1 or 2 late payments on a credit report will lower your score anywhere from 50 to 100 points. Just 1 or 2 payments. So it's not easy to recover from something like that. So we don't want any late payments. Amounts owed. For those on the call, on the webcast that do use credit cards, understand that the more you use that credit card, the worse. If you're using over 30% of your credit line every single month, the score will drop a little bit. So we want to make sure that we're not using so much of our credit card balances, even though we're paying them on time and in full. Too much credit card usage will bring the score down. And the other one I want to bring to your attention is length of credit history. A very often kind of suggestion, people will come into my office and say, hey, I've got great news, Mark. I'm going to clean up my credit. I've closed all my credit cards. That's actually one of the worst things you can do. You lose that history and you lose those credit limits. I'm not suggesting we need to use our credit cards all the time, but we really should maintain any accounts that we have right now and get those paid down. So be careful about closing accounts as a strategy for improving credit. So I'll bring this slide back up in a minute if anyone has questions. But I would certainly encourage you, my last takeaway, you guys, is the first step to really kind of understanding how am I doing credit-wise is to actually pull your own credit report. This is the site that I would encourage you to go to. It's absolutely free, annualcreditreport.com. You can choose which report. None is any better than the other, Equifax, Experian, or TransUnion. You can actually get a hard copy of it. You'll want to, number one, make sure that it's accurate, and number two, really kind of understand that are there accounts out there that are being reported as late and that are kind of dragging my score down. So this is the best place to get your own personal copy. You can get 1 report per each of these bureaus every single year. So I've got about 1:45. Let's take a few minutes and kind of do a little recap and answer some questions. So why don't you go ahead, if you do have a few questions or some feedback for me, I would love to hear it. Go ahead and chat that in, and I will do just a little bit of recap, but I would love to hear some feedback or questions that y'all have. So go ahead and chat that in based on what we've talked about. And it can be any. It doesn't even have to be a question. It can be something that you learned today that was new, or even something that you're doing that reinforced some good, strong behavior. I have my glasses right here in case I need to take a look. But feel free, and it can be anything, either a takeaway today, something that was most helpful. Okay. Wow, this is a really good question. So Chelsea typed in, she says, I don't have any credit cards. If I wanted to build credit, would it make sense to get one for that purpose? Chelsea, the short answer to your question is yes, it would make sense. However, please understand that I hope I was able to convey that it is really, really important that if we do use a credit card, we use it responsibly. We only use it and hopefully not carry a balance. But a credit card can be usually one of the easiest ways to start building a credit history. Because then 3, 4, 5 years down the road, when we're interested in maybe getting a car loan or applying for a mortgage, if you've got some history with a creditor, good on-time payments with a credit card makes a lot of sense. So make sure, I would encourage you to have one unsecured credit card, which means you're not putting a security deposit down or anything like that. At the credit union, people, first-time students, we give them a credit card with a $1,000 limit. That's it. And we encourage them only use it, for the stuff, and make sure you try to pay that bill in full. So Chelsea, I would encourage you just to get one, even if it's for emergencies. Use it once or twice a year for a tank of gas. Keep it open. It's a great way to build your credit history. Okay. Anything else, you guys, that kind of stuck out today in what we talked about? We started off with a little bit of wellness discussion, kind of a holistic discussion about some things we need to watch: saving, spending, borrowing, and planning. We talked about the importance of creating a tool for ourselves, a budget, a spending plan, to make sure we really have good transparency. How much do we have to work with every month? What are we spending our money on? And we can use a variety of different tools to track that. And then we talked about some common money mistakes. And I encouraged you, use technology. Make sure savings is a priority for us. Avoid having really low credit because it will cost us more. So those are some of the really key money mistakes that we talked about on a very high level. And I absolutely encourage you to maybe pull your own score to make sure that you kind of know what that is. And we had some really great discussion about the importance of creating some savings buckets. Megan, do you remember how many months is a good kind of goal for, if we were to create an emergency fund, how many months worth of kind of normal expenses would I like to have just set aside?
3.
3 is a good baseline. If we have nothing right now, a good baby step is $1,000, and that could be even a 6 or 12-month goal for folks. But if we're really going to create a good financial plan, a good emergency fund is kind of funded with about 3 months of living expenses, because life has unexpected events sometimes. So yeah. So I think we're in pretty good shape. Are there any other takeaways or learning points? I'm going to turn it over to Megan in just a few minutes, so she kind of can wrap us up and give you guys any takeaways from today's presentation and those type of things. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pop this slide up right here at the end, which is, yeah. Because absolutely, gang, if there's any individual questions or after you kind of think a little bit about the presentation, hey, I was thinking about doing this or that, you're always welcome to send me a note or call me. You don't have to be a member of the credit union. I'm always happy to answer those questions and at least give you my opinion. Okay? So terrific, Megan. I think we're really in really good shape. Hopefully you picked up some good stuff.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it.
No problem.
All right. Well, that was great. Very informative. Again, so if you have any questions for Mark, feel free to email him there, write that down, or you can contact me and I can forward the information along. So real quickly, we are finishing up our Unit 4, Module 2. So you have to do time management activity for Unit 5. Your Journal 4 is due, and then a confirmation that you sent an email about the interview out. If you haven't completed those will be due tonight by 11:59 p.m. Do we have any questions about anything that is due or anything moving forward? You can just put no in the chat box if you don't have any questions. Next week, we are all going to be completing the alternate assignment because our guest speaker is not going to be here. So I've sent out an announcement, and you will be able to access that through your email or through the Blackboard on the home page. All right. Questions? Let's see. Okay. No. Nope, you're good.
Megan, did I miss a question?
Oh, let me see.
Right above the nose, I may have because I didn't scroll.
I'm trying.
One more up. That one right there. Could you read that to me?
I used to use Mint. I have been trying to budget, but keep putting it off. So after today, I think I will go back to using Mint.
Okay, well that's more of like an empowering statement.
Yeah, and I don't know what Mint is. But.
Yeah, Mint is actually it's a program that is free. and you can actually kind of enroll for it. You have to link your accounts, and then you'll get graphs like, hey, you spent your money on this much on groceries, this much on housing, this much on eating out. But it's a little intrusive because you do have to give it access to your spending. And like I said, I'm going to send you a copy of a simple Excel spreadsheet.
Yes.
Maybe that's rather
great.
than not make, meant take some time.
Right.
But thank you is Sadie. Good for you. Don't make this any more challenging than it is in terms of just tracking your money. But I'm glad that you found some value. You see the importance.
Definitely. That's great. And I think a lot of, even if you just have a bank account, all of them seem to have the virtual banking now, which I know for mine, it shows me what I'm purchasing and kind of lumps it in and that sort of thing. So that is great to keep you on track as well. So great meeting today. Thank you so much for all of your input. And I will look forward to your assignments coming up this week. So take care.